Hello, I'm Judith Yates, true crime author and criminologist. This is Best True Crime. Every episode, I take you on a journey to explore crime, forensics, and investigations. In this episode, I'm in Franklin, Kentucky at the old Simpson County Jail, where I've met two fine gentlemen, and I got to do time in one of the oldest jails in Kentucky. Simpson County is located in the southern section of Kentucky, close to the Tennessee border. The population is over 17,000 and the county seat is Franklin. Simpson County was established in 1819, and by 1820 the population was close to 5,000. Here's my friend James to introduce the jail.
I'm James Henry Snyder, and I'm actually president of the Simpson County Historical Society and a volunteer here at the Old Jail Museum and Archives and at the Simpson County History Center across the street. And our old jail here was built in 1879 out of limestone, which was hauled from a local quarry out by the creek somewhere out east of town. And some of the stones are as much as a couple of tons in weight. The outside walls are 2 foot thick, and the inside walls are a foot thick. There are 6 cells on both of 2 floors. The 4 cells on the ends would have officially held 2 prisoners, and the 2 cells in the middle on both floors would have held 4. The jail was built in 1879 and used actually until 1986. The second floor had to be quit being used a couple of years earlier, because of fire codes. But we still maintain the jail today as a museum, and we store a lot of records upstairs.
Right now, we're walking around 206 College Street in downtown Franklin. The first jail was built in May of 1820. The first structure was a single brick room. It had 1 door and 1 window, and the room measured 18 feet square. A second jail was built by 1834. Now, the jailer's residence was used as the jail from at least 1860 through 1879. And by an act established in 1835, the jailer was required to live within 200 yards of the jail. Notice how these huge stones and thin windows resemble a fortress? Well, that was done on purpose. Designers H.P. McDonald Brothers purposely used this design as a psychological deterrence to crime, and it was to provide a escape-proof enclosure for prisoners. And you see these very visible iron bars and straps bolted to the stone. Well, these are unique to the Simpson County Jail.
Angola, Angola, they're doing time, Angola. Say, C.O. 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 Jailer! C.O. What?
Who are you?
Jailer.
What's your name?
James Mooneyhead.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
I run this place.
Who are you?
James Snyder.
What do you do?
President of the Historical Society.
Of what?
Of the Simpson County Historical Society, talking about how this building was used.
What is this place?
Simpson County Jail.
Uh-oh. Looks like I'm doing time again. Hey, everybody. My name is Judith Yates. I'm a true crime author and criminologist. We're all wearing our masks. You need to wear your mask. Right now, we're in the old Simpson County Jail. I'm doing time. I'm talking to these guys. It's going to be a great show. Stick around, and maybe we'll pay your bail.
Meet James Mooneyhan. His grandfather, Henry Aiken, was jailer, and his father, Virgil Mooneyhan, was a deputy. Here he shows the badges that his grandfather and his father wore, and the badges James wore during his tenure of over 20 years as Simpson County's jailer. Now, we'll be talking with James later in this episode. James grew up in this former jail. He remembers playing in the backyard and having to go inside when inmates were being transferred in. I asked him about any escapes during his time as the jailer, and here's what he told us.
Back in September of 1980, I had a trustee that did the food services and toilet paper and so forth. And he knew where the key was. The jailer sat right inside this door, or the deputy jailer. And so one night, overnight, the trustee had stolen the deputy jailer's key, which we didn't know. And the deputy had a brother inside the bottom. And we had 5 or 6 or 7 people in there. And he gave the key to his brother. And then we had no night security other than the jailer was asleep, and the police officers rang a bell outside if they wanted to put somebody else in jail. The trustee that stole the key gave it to his brother. He unlocked the door, and then 2 of the guys would not leave with him. There were 5 that escaped and went out the door right behind you there, over the fence, and took off. And the next morning, about 6 o'clock, when the deputy got up, he discovered that the 5 were missing when he did his head count. So he called me, and by the time I got up here, they had caught 2 of them, 2 of the most dangerous ones. One of them had gotten on the railroad track going out of town and had sat down to rest and got confused and walked back into town and walked right straight into the officer that arrested him the first time. So by the time I got back down here, we had 2 of them back in jail, which left 3 out. But the other 3 were captured. One of them, their pastor, called me from down in Tennessee and turned him in. And then we found the other one up in a tree up in the eastern part of the city, hiding. And so we had them all back in about 3 or 4 days. But the only thing we didn't have back was the key. And I thought all along that the man that got out with the key still had the key. We searched, couldn't find it. So I put him up the stairs by himself. And I changed the padlock to a different key. And left the key that he had that wouldn't work in either one of the 2 locks. I had it locked in the cell, and it didn't work to either one of them. So on Saturdays, I worked all day so the deputy would have a day off, and my wife cooked the meal. And so I was sitting right here, my office was right there. There was a window behind these cases. I was listening to Kentucky and Vanderbilt play football, and I heard a squeak on the stairs, which I knew that there were 1 or 2 that squeaked. And I had gone up and changed the locks, and every day I think he checked to see if we had the right lock on there. That day we did, but I was ready for him. He came down the steps slowly, and by that time, the kitchen door was right there, and he was on next to the bottom, and I had the gun out. And in not too nice of a language, I told him to hit the ground. And my wife immediately, being in the kitchen, called the police. And I thought, well, it's a good time to put the scare to him, so I just said, you know what, I think I'll just shoot you right between the eyes, and if I do that, I remember this was back in 1980, I could say that then. And I said, if I did that, I could get away because you were escaping again. And I could shoot you right between the eyes and never ever have to worry about you again. I didn't use quite that soft a language on him. And one of my city police officer friends came running through the door, and Donnie West, he was the first one here. And he come running through and he said, Mr. Moon, don't shoot that SOB, don't shoot him. I said, well, give me a good reason why I shouldn't. By that time, he was really shaking, you know. and I was gonna have a good witness or two. So we got him locked back up, found the key, and put him away for good, charged him with escape plus other charges, and he spent time in the state penitentiary several years. He got out and was not out long until he was back in, but this time he was in at the new Simpson County Detention Center, so we didn't have much trouble with him after that.
I was so excited to bring you this interesting part of history of the Simpson County Jail. It was probably my favorite part of the tour. But first, I want to recommend a book to you by one of my favorite authors, Sonova Cantrell. The Simpson County Jail housed Confederate prisoners during the Civil War. This is actual graffiti in the north second-story room sketched on the walls. The prisoners might have used coal or maybe a stolen pencil. Now this is some type of diary, but mostly drawings revealing a number of Civil War officers. These drawings could date from any period during and immediately after the war. The Historical Society believes they have identified the men in the drawings, though it's unknown for sure. I feel like if you could study the drawings and the words carefully, you can feel what these soldiers were feeling and see the war through their eyes. Can you imagine what they saw and how they felt? The jailer's home has been reconstructed. This is where James Mooneyhan grew up, and he walked us through the house, recalling where he spent time as a boy. The jail and the jailer's house are now a museum and holds amazing archives, including war memorabilia. Be sure to check out the music room. This place holds a special surprise for fans of Johnny and June Carter Cash. Kitty Wells fans will enjoy it as well.
Well, my first stint at the jail was when my grandfather was elected jailer in 1954. 19.
You have to talk a little louder for us.
Okay. My grandfather became jailer in 1942 and served 3 terms for 12 years, and then I was elected in, I think it was 1982. And served as jailer for 22 years. I was here for approximately 4 or 5 years, and then we built a new Simpson County Detention Center and closed this down. Well, the inmates loved the cooking of my grandmother when my grandfather was jailer, because the jail people that lived here ate exactly the same thing that the inmates ate. And my grandfather was a farmer, and they got fresh milk from the cow, they got country ham, they got fresh eggs. And then when I returned and became jailer, why, I decided that we needed to feed them better food, and we did. We would go to the store and buy fresh chicken and feed them chicken breast, mashed potatoes, green beans, plenty of fresh vegetables, good meat, and so one thing I never had any problem with was complaints about the food while I was jailer.
How about on the holidays?
Holidays, the food on the holidays, the food on the holidays, is what you're talking about. Yeah, we had turkey and we had ham, and when we went down to the new jail, I got some of the churches in town to bake fresh pies, and we'd have 100 inmates and 200 or 300 fresh pies made by the people that were church people and wanted to do something, and we always had turkey, and we always, not always, but a lot of times we'd have turkey and ham, and so we always had good food.
Okay, and how about inmate visitation when their families and friends wanted to visit? What were the rules, and how did you work visitation?
Visitation was pretty hard down here because the only thing we could do was allow the one visitor at a time upstairs and downstairs, and we had to kind of limit the time, and we visited, we had 2 visitation days, but if somebody came in from out of town, we allowed visitors. I was never very strict about that because I felt like if somebody drove from Nashville or Bowling Green to visit someone that was in jail, a lot of times it was parents, sometimes it was older people, and I didn't feel like it was fair to turn them away, so we would always give them visits. First came here, there was no recreation. I instituted recreation in a lot to the right of where I'm sitting now because there was a fence there, and I would have the inmates would be released one floor at a time to go for maybe an hour, 2 hours recreation with the deputy with them all the time, and I never had any problem with trying to escape because I think they were so glad to get some fresh air that they knew it would mess up everything if they tried something. So, and then of course down at New Detention Center where there was an outdoor recreation area.
Okay, how about a heat source or during the summer, a cool air source?
Well, believe it or not, these big rock walls, when they got cool in the summertime, they stayed cool. And in the wintertime, we had warm morning stove that sat right in the middle of the downstairs hallway and kept it very warm. As a matter of fact, you'd find the inmates walking around in their t-shirts in the dead of winter. So fortunately, the rock walls helped us out with that, and once they got either warm or got cool, they stayed that way. Females were pretty rare, and it was a big inconvenience for us because there was really, when they brought a female inmate in, they were locked in the back cell with doors pulled to in the hallways, so that there was absolutely no contact between the male and the female. And very seldom, I don't remember down here ever having more than one female, and generally the judge, all the judges, the county judges were very sympathetic to what was going on and would allow bond but I don't remember females for anything other than the DUI or public drunk and occasionally an assault. But it presented a big problem, and we had to rearrange just about everything to house a female.
So you saw a difference between what a man was in for and what a female would have been in for?
Very seldom do we get females for more than DUIs or public intoxication, and a lot of times they would be arrested and carried straight to court, and the judge would have a bond made for them. And long term, I don't remember ever having a female inmate more than a week or 2 weeks at the most. And of course, when they did that, they took away like 4 beds, and so that was pretty much an inconvenience. We got a whole lot of people coming in on the weekends for DUIs, public intoxication, and things like that. But the biggest flow was on weekends.
Okay, did you, as time progressed, did you see a change in how they were treating females in the system and the change in the crimes that females were committing?
Yes, when we moved down to the new detention center, while we had cells set aside for females, and one of the biggest things, in addition to the DUIs and the, which we had, of course, by that time we had drunk tanks and isolation cells, but the thing that I remember the most when we first opened up was the cold checks, because cold checks got to be so bad everywhere, not only in this county, and the judge would then sentence them until the check was, restitution was made on, and then later on we had some females. I know I had one with an armed robbery. She and her brother and another man robbed one of our local drugstores, and were caught that same night by police down in Tennessee, and I kept her for several months. When I first became jailer down here, we were looking at strictly alcohol, and then as time progressed, it became, the next step was alcohol and Valium, which the people that used it called blue Valium, and then became alcohol and marijuana, and at the very end I had a real problem down here with LSD, because it was so easy to slip into jail. The mail, it changed the way we did mail, because a drop of LSD could be put under a stamp and you couldn't tell it was there. So I caught some of that, and then we immediately had to change the way we did the mail. We tore the stamps off the envelope, took the letter out of the envelope, shook it to be sure there was nothing in it without reading it, folded it back up, and gave it to the inmate then after we did that. And then, of course, after down at the jail, new detention center, LSD came in, and then there was just all kinds of a mixture of drugs, and you just didn't know what they had taken, and they wouldn't tell you. And what we tried to do was protect them from themselves, really, and that's the way we had to handle that. And we would oftentimes carry them to the emergency room, and because heroin was becoming and where it was a little bit cheaper than some of the other drugs. Marijuana was, for a long time, was one of the drugs that were charges, but fortunately, marijuana was not a drug that you could overdose on. They would be high, and they would come out of that pretty quickly, but the drugs that they took in their veins, such as cocaine and then LSD and the other things, were very, very dangerous. And we just spent a whole lot of time trying to protect them and try to find out what was wrong with them, because to put them in a cell and leave them, sometimes they would see spiders crawling up the wall, or some big animal after them when there was nothing in the cell with them, and the hallucinations that came with those drugs was just something terrible, and we had to keep an eye on them all the time.
The jail was in use until 1986, and now you can step back in time to visit and to tour. Across the street, be sure to visit the Simpson County Archives and Museum. Both are free to the public, and group tours are welcome. You can view old scrapbooks, original collections of all types, family Bibles, assorted manuscripts, census records, memorabilia, clothing, photos, and even a 1930s fire engine. I love fire engines. Eric Vaughn, the Simpson County jailer, helped oversee some of the building's work, which inmates at the Simpson County Detention Center did much of the work getting the building ready to become a museum. During construction, they unearthed a treasure trove of artifacts, some which appear in the glass cases today. I want to thank my two new pals, James Mooneyhan and James Henry Snyder, for their jail tour and numerous stories. I would love for you to visit the Simpson County Archives and Museum, and especially the old jail. And a gentle reminder to wear your mask and wash your hands, please. And here's a reminder to go to my website and visit my virtual bookstore. And there's even a signing table at www.truecrimebook.net. All of my books are available, and you can get them personally autographed. Be sure and visit the website for the Simpson County Archives at www.simpsoncountykyarchives.com. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Best True Crime. I'm Judith A. Yates, and I hope you subscribe. Be sure to visit truecrimebook.net and be safe out there.